Chief Engineer Vex Lore slammed his tentacles against the quantum diagnostic panel, sending ripples of bioluminescent frustration through his normally composed cerulean skin. By the seven suns of Proxima, this cannot be happening to the most advanced vessel in the Galactic Confederation. The massive engine core of the GCS Stellar Apex, pride of the Confederation fleet, pulsed an angry red, mocking him with each unstable surge. Around him, a dozen of the most brilliant engineering minds in known space scrambled between holographic displays, their movements growing more frantic with each failed attempt to stabilize the ship's revolutionary quantum drive. Chief called out First Engineer Naztiel, her voice modulator crackling with barely contained panic. The primary containment field is fluctuating at 47% efficiency and dropping. At this rate, we have perhaps 3 standard cycles before catastrophic failure. Vex Lore's secondary heart skipped a beat. 3 cycles? The Stellar Apex was supposed to be their crowning achievement, a warship so advanced it made their rivals' best vessels look like primitive solar sailors. The quantum drive alone had taken 50 years to perfect, or so they thought. Have you tried recalibrating the tachyon matrix? Vex Lore asked, knowing full well they had attempted this basic fix at least 7 times already. But when you're watching your life's work crumble around you, even the obvious solutions bear repeating. Yes, Chief Naztiel responded, her normally pristine head tendrils now drooping with exhaustion. We've also tried reversing the polarity, reinitializing the quantum buffer, and even attempted to bypass the secondary containment protocols. Nothing works. From across the engine room, Senior Theorist Kaz Vac threw up all 4 of his arms in exasperation. This is mathematically impossible. Our calculations were perfect. The design has won 3 Galactic Excellence Awards. There must be something we're missing. Vex Lore felt his pride crumbling faster than the ship's containment field. They had brought in experts from 7 different star systems. Each one had taken one look at their groundbreaking design and declared it flawless right before the problem started. The ship's computer chose that moment to remind them of their impending doom. Warning: quantum core instability at critical levels. Evacuation protocols are now mandatory. This is not a drill. Warning. Computer, mute warnings, Vex Lore shouted, his voice echoing through the now silent engine room. The quiet somehow made things worse, as if the absence of the alarm made their failure more real. Looking around at his team, the finest engineers the Confederation had produced in 3 generations, Vex Lore saw the same defeated expression on each of their faces. They had tried everything. They had failed everything. And now, their masterpiece was about to become the most expensive disaster since the Arcturus supernova gate incident. Sir Naztiel said quietly, her voice modulator barely above a whisper. Perhaps it's time to consider the unthinkable option. Vex Lore's skin darkened to a deep indigo, the color of supreme displeasure in his species. You cannot be suggesting. The humans, sir. I've heard they have a certain knack for solving impossible engineering problems. The word humans sent a ripple of murmurs through the engine room. Bringing in a human? On their most advanced ship? The very suggestion was almost as painful as watching their quantum drive tear itself apart. Admiral Creta's command center buzzed with nervous energy as the emergency council gathered. The holographic displays showed the Stellar Apex's deteriorating condition in excruciating detail, each updating graph more depressing than the last. You want to bring a what aboard my ship? Admiral Creta's scales flared a brilliant orange, a clear sign of agitation among the Drachnid species. Chief Engineer Vex Lore, have the quantum fluctuations affected your mental faculties? Commander Zelpor, known for his diplomatic skills, cleared his throat. With all due respect, Admiral, the humans have shown remarkable creativity in solving engineering problems. Remember the Centauri Bridge incident? Oh yes, Science Director Mira X chimed in, her crystalline form sparkling with barely contained amusement, when their engineer fixed a quantum tunnel generator with what they called duct tape and paper clips. Highly irregular, but it worked. Admiral Creta paced the command center, each step leaving small scorch marks on the floor, a common side effect of agitated Drachnid physiology. But this is the Stellar Apex, our most advanced warship, the pride of 7 star systems, and you want to let a human tinker with it. 2 cycles remaining until critical failure, the ship's computer helpfully announced. The humans have a saying, Vex Lore offered cautiously. Desperate times call for desperate measures. They have a lot of sayings, muttered Commander Zelpor. Most of them make no logical sense, like their obsession with comparing things to cake. Admiral Kree-Ta stopped pacing, his scales shifting to a thoughtful blue. Who would we even contact? Surely not their official engineering corps. Actually, Vex Lore said, pulling up a personnel file, I have someone in mind. They call him Jack Morrison. He's known for solving unusual problems. The Admiral's scales turned a pale yellow, the drachnid equivalent of becoming ill. The same Jack Morrison who rewired an entire space station using spare parts from what humans call a microwave oven. The very same Vex Lore confirmed. He's eccentric, but his success rate is undeniable. One cycle, until critical failure, the computer announced, its artificial voice somehow managing to sound smug. Admiral Kree-Ta looked at the faces around him, some hopeful, others horrified, and made his decision. Send the transmission. But if this human turns our quantum drive into some kind of primitive steam engine, you'll all be reassigned to maintain waste recycling units in the outer rim. The human's arrival was about as graceful as a Plutonian space whale attempting synchronized swimming. Jack Morrison stumbled out of the transport pod, carrying what appeared to be an ancient leather bag that had seen better decades. His dark hair stuck up at odd angles, and his standard-issue spacesuit looked like it had been modified with various pockets, clips, and what appeared to be was that a cup holder. Sorry about the landing, he said, straightening up and adjusting the bag on his shoulder. Your gravity compensators could use a bit of tweaking. They're fighting against themselves, probably why you're using twice the power you need to. Vex Lore's skin rippled with indignation. Our gravity systems are state-of-the-art. They were designed by the brightest minds in the Confederation. Yeah, Jack waved dismissively, already walking toward the engine core. Same folks who built this quantum drive, right? Speaking of which, how long till it goes boom? 42 minutes until critical failure, the ship's computer answered, somehow sounding pleased to have a new audience for its countdown. Admiral Kree-Ta, who had insisted on personally overseeing this potential disaster, watched the human with all three of his eyes. Mr. Morrison, I must remind you that the Stellar Apex contains classified technology. You'll need to sign several non-disclosure agreements before. Jack had already opened his bag, pulling out what looked like a metal box covered in blinking lights and duct tape. Your quantum containment field is about to collapse. Either I look at your classified tech now, or you can classify the debris field later. The engineering team watched in horror as Jack approached their pride and joy, the quantum core with his primitive scanning device. He walked around it slowly, occasionally muttering to himself and making odd noises that seemed to range from HSKSK to what sounded suspiciously like a laugh. This is fascinating, he said, tapping the scanner. You've got it all wrong, but it's fascinating. Naztiel's head tendrils curled in shock. Wrong? This design won the Galactic Excellence Award for Innovation. Yeah, and I won a hot dog eating contest in college. Doesn't mean it was good for me. Jack pressed a few buttons on his scanner, projecting a holographic display that looked decidedly less elegant than the ship's own systems. Look here. You've built the most sophisticated, complex quantum drive in history, and that's exactly the problem. The problem is that it's too advanced, Vex Lore asked, his skin turning the mottled green of confusion. Bingo! Jack snapped his fingers, causing several aliens to flinch. You've got 15 different systems, all trying to be the smartest kid in class. They're fighting each other. It's like putting a bunch of genius professors in a room and telling them to paint a house. They'll spend so much time arguing about the optimal brush stroke patterns that the house never gets painted. 28 minutes until critical failure, the computer chimed helpfully. Jack shoved his scanner back into his bag and pulled out what appeared to be a basic toolkit. The kind you might find in any human garage. Right then. Time to show you folks the beauty of keeping it simple. Several engineers gasped as he approached the quantum core with a wrench in hand. Admiral Kree-Ta's scales turned such a bright orange they were nearly glowing. You cannot be serious about using primitive tools on our most advanced. Trust me, Jack grinned, twirling the wrench with practiced ease. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Now, who's going to help me teach this quantum drive how to stop overthinking itself? Jack Morrison lay on his back under the quantum core's main control panel, surrounded by a collection of tools that made the alien engineers wonder if they were watching their ship being repaired or dismantled. His whistling echoed through the engine room, occasionally interrupted by muttered observations and the clang of metal on metal. Please stop hitting our quantum harmonizer with that prehistoric implement. Vexlor's skin had taken on a previously undocumented shade of distress. The resonance patterns are calibrated too. The resonance patterns are fighting each other. Jack's voice came from beneath the panel. You've got quantum fields trying to sync up with 15 different bass frequencies. It's like trying to dance to 15 different songs at once. Nobody's that coordinated, not even your fancy AI. 22 minutes until critical failure, the computer announced. Might I suggest updating your personal affairs? Can someone please mute that thing? Jack called out. And can someone explain to me why you needed 3 separate containment fields? The power draw alone is ridiculous. Senior theorist Kaz Vex stepped forward, all 4 arms clutching various data pads. The triple containment system is based on revolutionary theoretical models. The first field contains the quantum particles, the second field contains any potential leakage from the first field, and the third field is there to contain your containment. Yeah, I got that. Jack slid out from under the panel, his face smudged with some kind of lubricant. But here's the thing, you're so busy containing everything, you're not letting anything flow naturally. It's like wearing 3 spacesuits because you're afraid one might leak. Admiral Crete, who had been watching the proceedings with growing alarm, finally spoke up. Mr. Morrison, I fail to see how these primitive analogies are helping our situation. That's because you're all thinking in quantum algorithms when you should be thinking in plumbing, Jack replied, reaching into his bag and pulling out what appeared to be a crude paper notebook. Actually paper, made from trees. He began sketching something with a pencil, another archaic tool that had several engineers exchanging worried glances. Look here, he continued, holding up the sketch. Your quantum drive is like a river. You've built so many dams to control it that the water can't flow properly. Sometimes you need to let physics do what physics does best, find its own path. Quantum physics doesn't work that way, Naztil protested, her head tendrils practically tied in knots. We have thousands of research papers proving. 15 minutes until critical failure, the computer interrupted. Might I suggest sending final messages to loved ones? Jack stood up, wiping his hands on his already stained uniform. Okay, pop quiz time. Who here has actually seen a quantum particle? He looked around the room at the blank faces. No one. Right, because you can't. You can only observe its effects. So all those fancy theories, they're just our best guess at explaining what we can't see. He walked over to the main control terminal, pushing aside several holographic displays to access the base programming. You've built this whole system on theoretical models stacked on theoretical models. It's beautiful, really, like a house of cards made of equations. But sometimes you need to stop theorizing and start doing. The human's fingers flew over the controls, making changes that had the alien engineers crying out in horror. He was bypassing safety protocols, rerouting power systems, and somehow managing to whistle while doing it. You cannot just ignore the theoretical frameworks, Vexlor protested. The quantum harmonics alone require 10 minutes until critical failure, the computer announced cheerfully. Evacuation pods are now on standby. Theory's great, Jack said, not looking up from his work. But you know what's better? Results. Now, who's brave enough to help me rewire this quantum core the way it should have been done in the first place? Fair warning, it's going to involve getting your hands dirty and breaking about 50 different engineering regulations. The room fell silent except for the hum of the unstable quantum core and Jack's continued whistling. Finally, Naztil stepped forward, her head tendrils straightening with determination. Show me what to do, but if we blow up, I'm blaming you in my final report. That's the spirit, Jack grinned, handing her what appeared to be a simple wrench. Now, let me show you why sometimes the best solution is the simple solution. Jack stepped back from the quantum core, his face breaking into a wide grin that made several alien engineers take an instinctive step backward. That expression, they had learned in the past few minutes, usually preceded something that violated at least a dozen safety protocols. 7 minutes, until critical failure, the computer announced. Shall I begin playing appropriate end of existence music? Got it, Jack snapped his fingers, pointing at the holographic display he had modified with his makeshift equipment. Your quantum drive isn't failing. It's trying to evolve. Admiral Cretier's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a confused purple. Evolve? Machines do not evolve, Mr. Morrison. They function or they fail. That's where you're wrong, Jack said, pulling up his crude drawings alongside the ship's sophisticated diagnostic displays. Look at these power fluctuations. They're not random. They're following a pattern, trying to find a more efficient configuration. Your quantum drive is actually trying to fix itself, but all your safety systems are fighting it. Vexlor's skin pulsed with skepticism. Are you suggesting we should let an unstable quantum core experiment with itself? Exactly. Jack began rapidly typing commands into the main console. Your systems are so advanced they've accidentally created a form of quantum evolution. But instead of letting it happen naturally, you're forcing it to stay in its original state. It's like trying to stop a butterfly from emerging by reinforcing its cocoon. 6 minutes until critical failure. Consider this your final warning to run away screaming. Naz Teal, who had been studying Jack's modifications, suddenly straightened. Wait, the harmonics patterns, they do show signs of self-organization, but that would mean... It would mean completely rebuilding our understanding of quantum engineering, senior theorist Kaz Vac interrupted, all four arms waving in agitation. It would invalidate decades of research. Hundreds of papers would need to be rewritten. 5 minutes until critical failure. I suggest panic now to avoid the rush later. Jack turned to Admiral Cree-Tai, his expression serious for the first time. Here's the deal. I can stabilize your quantum drive, but not by fixing it. We need to help it fix itself. That means removing about 60% of your control systems and letting the quantum fields find their natural balance. The Admiral's scales turned practically translucent. Remove our control systems? That goes against every safety regulation in the Confederation. 4 minutes until critical failure. Has anyone considered prayer? Look, Jack said, spreading his hands. Right now you've got the most advanced quantum drive ever created, and it's about to tear itself apart because you won't let it work the way it wants to. I'm offering you something better, a quantum drive that can adapt, evolve, and probably outperform anything else in your fleet. But you have to trust me. The engineering team looked at each other nervously. Vexlor's skin had taken on the pale blue of deep uncertainty. The quantum harmonics alone would take weeks to recalibrate. 3 minutes until critical failure. Would anyone like to write a poem about our imminent doom? No recalibration, Jack stated firmly. We pull out the excess control systems, establish a basic containment field, and let the quantum fields do what they do best, find the path of least resistance. Your drive isn't failing. It's trying to teach us something new about quantum physics. And we're either going to learn from it or blow up trying. Admiral Cree-Tai looked around the engine room at his engineering team, then back at the human with his primitive tools and revolutionary ideas. 2 minutes until critical failure, the computer helpfully added. Do it, the Admiral finally commanded, his scales settling into the deep gold of command decision. But Mr. Morrison, if this fails, I will personally ensure your name becomes synonymous with the greatest engineering disaster in Confederation history. Jack's grin returned as he grabbed his tools. Fair enough. Now, who's ready to make history? And someone please mute that computer. The next 90 seconds became a blur of activity that would later be described in engineering texts as either brilliant improvisation or complete madness, depending on who wrote the chapter. Jack Morrison moved through the engine room like a conductor leading an orchestra of chaos, directing alien engineers with rapid-fire instructions that somehow made terrible, wonderful sense. Naz Teal, bypass the secondary containment matrix. Kaz Vac, reroute the power from the tertiary systems into the primary buffer. Vexlor, help me strip these control circuits and stop cringing. They're not helping anyway. 1 minute until critical failure, the computer announced, its voice now muffled after Jack had somehow rerouted its speakers through what he claimed was a better sound system. Would anyone like to hear a joke about quantum uncertainty? The human's hands flew over control panels, ripping out sophisticated monitoring systems and replacing them with what he called streamlined solutions. The engineering team watched in fascinated horror as he integrated simple Earth technology with their advanced systems in ways that should not have worked but did. See this power converter, Jack explained while simultaneously rewiring a quantum stabilizer. You've got it running through 7 different precision controllers. But quantum particles don't need micromanagement. They need freedom with boundaries, like teenagers, but less moody. Naz Teal, who had found herself caught up in the human's infectious enthusiasm, helped him install what he called a quantum field guide. But how will we maintain precise control over the particle interactions? "We won't," Jack replied, grinning as he connected a surprisingly simple circuit to their main power grid. "We're just going to suggest which way they should go. Think of it like herding cats. You don't control cats. You just make one path more appealing than the others. 30 seconds until critical failure." Anyone interested in my collection of last-minute confessions? The quantum core's angry red pulsing had begun to take on a different rhythm. As they stripped away layers of control systems, replacing them with Jack's hybrid solutions, the energy patterns started shifting in ways their sensors had never recorded before. "Look at that," Jack pointed excitedly at a holographic display showing quantum field interactions. "The particles are already starting to self-organize. Your drive isn't just stable, it's optimizing itself." Vexlor's skin had taken on a fascinated purple tinge as he watched the readings, the efficiency ratings. "They're exceeding our theoretical maximums. This is impossible. 15 seconds until critical failure. Should I prepare a dramatic countdown?" "Quick, feed the power back through the primary systems," Jack called out, making final adjustments to his modifications. "And someone grab that spare coupling from my bag, the one wrapped in duct tape." Admiral Cree, who had been watching the proceedings with a mixture of horror and hope, finally spoke up. "You wrapped a quantum coupling in adhesive tape. 10 seconds. "The tape's not for function, it's for luck," Jack explained, installing the component with practiced ease. "Although you'd be surprised how often it comes in handy. Now, everyone stand back. This is either going to be amazing or spectacular, and either way you'll want some distance. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, maybe 1. The quantum core pulsed once, twice, and then settled into a smooth, steady hum. The angry red glow transformed into a peaceful blue radiance that filled the engine room with soft light. On the diagnostic displays, power readings stabilized at levels that had several engineers checking their equipment for malfunction. "Critical failure averted," the computer announced, sounding almost disappointed. "New quantum configuration detected. Processing warning operating parameters exceed known theoretical limits. Error unable to classify current system state. Suggestion update theoretical physics." Jack stepped back, wiping his hands on his uniform with satisfaction. There you have it. A quantum drive that's not just stable but teaching itself to be better. Give it a few days, and it'll probably figure out improvements we haven't even thought of yet. The engineering team stared at their transformed engine core in stunned silence. Where there had once been a maze of control systems, there was now an elegant blend of simplified human engineering and advanced alien technology. It was less complex, yet somehow more sophisticated. Less controlled, yet more stable. Less theoretical, yet more advanced. Mr. Morrison, Admiral Cree said slowly, his scales shifting to a color nobody had seen before. "I believe you have some explaining to do about exactly what you've created here. Initial performance test of the modified GCS Stellar Apex, Mark 1. The computer announced, now speaking with what Jack called better acoustics. "Note, this system has not been approved by any recognized regulatory body. Additional note, I find this deeply concerning." The bridge crew watched as Admiral Cree ordered the first full power test of their modified quantum drive. The massive view screens showed empty space ahead, carefully selected for this potentially catastrophic demonstration. "Power output at 200% of previous maximum," Teal reported, her head tendrils coiling in disbelief. "Quantum field stability at, this cannot be right, 140% of theoretical maximum." Jack lounged in a chair he had modified with several spare parts, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "Keep going. She's just warming up." The Admiral's scales flickered between excitement and anxiety. "Take us to full power. Carefully." The Stellar Apex surged forward, accelerating with a smoothness that made several engineers check their instruments twice. The stars on the view screen began to blur. "Power output now at 300%, Teal announced. "Sir, the quantum fields they're optimizing themselves. Every minute, the efficiency ratings improve." Vexlor, who had finally stopped flinching at the sight of Jack's modifications, studied the readings with growing amazement. "The drive is learning. It is actually learning how to perform better. This violates at least 7 laws of physics." Nah, Jack replied, spinning lazily in his modified chair. Those laws just needed an update. Think of it as physics version 2.0, now with more common sense. The ship's computer interrupted with what almost sounded like awe in its artificial voice. Alert, new space-time configurations detected. The quantum drive is achieving transit speeds that exceed our ability to measure them. Also, it appears to be humming what humans call a happy tune. Admiral Kree-Ta turned to Jack, his scales now glowing with a color reserved for moments of historic significance. Mr. Morrison, you were supposed to fix our ship. Instead, you have created something entirely new, something that should not be possible. That's kind of our thing, Jack said with a shrug. Humans, I mean. We're really good at doing the impossible, especially when someone tells us it can't be done. Now, who wants to see what this baby can really do when we stop babying it? The entire bridge crew leaned forward eagerly, their initial skepticism completely forgotten in the face of their ship's extraordinary transformation. The Stellar Apex wasn't just fixed, it had become something more. Something that would change the way the Confederation thought about engineering forever. 3 cycles later, the Confederation's Engineering Council sat in stunned silence as they reviewed the performance data from the Stellar Apex. The quantum drive's efficiency had continued to improve hourly, and the ship now served as a testament to what Admiral Kree-Ta called the terrifying potential of human engineering. Let me get this straight, Council Leader Brixtal said, all 7 of his eyes blinking in sequence. Not only did this human save our most advanced ship, but he completely revolutionized our understanding of quantum mechanics using primitive tools, adhesive tape, and what he calls gut instinct. And he did it in less than 2 minutes, Vex Lore added, his skin glowing with an odd mixture of pride and embarrassment, while whistling something he called show tunes. The council chamber erupted in excited discussion. Centuries of engineering doctrine were being rewritten. Throughout the Confederation, ships were already being modified with what had been dubbed the Morrison method, a perfect blend of advanced theory and practical simplicity. Jack Morrison himself had already moved on to his next challenge, but not before leaving them with one final piece of human wisdom. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most complex one, he had said, packing up his battered tool bag. It's the one that works. The ship's computer, which had developed what the crew swore was a sense of humor, had the last word. Attention all personnel, our quantum drive is now operating at 500% efficiency and has begun composing poetry. I find this both impressive and mildly concerning.